This episode's story is titled The Hand, a dramatic tale by Lee Hulme. Content warnings for this episode are violence, weapons, swearing. Please remember to take good care of yourself. And with that, why don't we begin?
Desmond threw his briefcase onto the armchair as he entered the open-plan living room. Rubbing his hands down his face, fingers clawed until they left white trails on his flesh, he vaguely wondered why it was so quiet. Normally the twins would be running their nanny, Ryan, ragged with post-school energy, and he would quickly be enveloped in hugs and stories of their day. Ryan would take this time to rest for an hour, before Desmond would either cook, order in, or take everyone out for dinner. Today there was no sound, no hugs to drive away the remains of the job that stained his soul and bled him dry each day, so those girls could have the best of everything. They were just 7 years old. Too old to remember the loss of their other father, the one who had carried and birthed them, the one who had died so pointlessly in a motorway incident involving a payload of oak trucks and a snapped cable so soon after their arrival. Desmond checked the rooms but found no sign of anyone. No note on the fridge. Nothing missing except their usual school outfits. He was less sure about Ryan's belongings, but everything looked put away, not like anyone had been ransacking it. But still, the house was silent. He went back to the living room, pulling out his phone and tapping an instruction to call Ryan. Surely he and the twins couldn't be far. The voice answering the phone wasn't Ryan's. He was light, his accent lilted, the words dancing almost visibly from his mouth. But this one was dark and dented at the sides, paint scratched off by gravel, and probably hosting a rat's nest.
Desmond DePauli. It's been a long time.
Something cold descended over Desmond at the sound of that voice. Here was someone dangerous, said his lizard brain. Here was someone to be cautious of. So long, I suppose I forgot who you are. Where are my kids? Where is Ryan?
If I told you that, I'd be as stupid as your nanny looks right now.
The cold hardened the blood in Desmond's veins. What do you want?
Right to the point. All family man until something else shows up, am I right? Yeah. Well, let me tell you then. I already killed the other 6. You're the last one standing in my way. I want 8.
Desmond's jaw clenched hard. If this kidnapper had already felled the other 6 hands, then 8, the hidden, was potentially almost revealed. Each carried a piece of the trail that led to him, but nowhere you could easily find it while the person was still alive. Desmond absently touched the scar around his hairline as he replied, "And why would I just waltz in and give this over to you?" "Because if you don't, I get to have fun with these little beauties until they die." "Oh, not the type that just sprung into your head, not a sicko. Just whatever I happen to have handy in my little surgical kit." Desmond pulled the phone away from his face, having to strain a little to force his locked-up muscles to move. It seemed like this kidnapper remained under the impression that the trail he was finding was the right one. It was, in fact, a false one. The boat-assured legs 1 through 7 would quietly dispose of any searchers. Of course, it was never expected that anyone would figure it out, much less get all of the trail. Desmond had thought this level of deception a waste of time. Seemed he was wrong. If the other 6 were dead, something he could easily check, then he was the last bastion. Fitting. His hand, the blade, had always been the final resort of the organization. When all options had been exhausted by the other 6, that's when they gave him a target. His eyes narrowed as he returned the phone to his mouth, hitting the speaker button and confirming the app he used to automatically record calls was working. "What is it you want, then?" he growled.
Why, you, of course. You come, alone, to where I say, and put yourself in my hands. Once I have you, these lovely girls and your nanny can go free.
"And I trust you because—" The voice on the other end chuckled.
Because you have no other choice. You for your girls.
"And Ryan."
And Ryan, if you insist.
"All right. Suppose I don't have much choice. Don't hurt them. Just tell me where to meet you, and I'll be there as fast as I can."
Wise man, to know when you're beaten. After all, what is the life of your children against a faceless shadow which uses you as its blade in the shadows whenever it sees fit? I'm texting you the information now. Looking forward to our reunion.
Desmond left his phone on the counter between the living room and the kitchen and entered his bedroom. He couldn't place the voice, though apparently he had once been acquainted with its owner. Perhaps he'd let him live long enough to explain. The tap of a button on a remote slid open a hidden panel in the wall by his bed, revealing his cache of weapons. The ones that belonged to him, not the hands. First, he changed into what he thought of as his field suit. After filling the various pouches, holsters, and bandoliers with weapons, he filled a duffel bag and returned to his phone, ignoring the text from the kidnapper to work his way through the other 6 legs. Each phone line took him directly to voicemail. He left a short message on each, just in case, and brought up the number to reach the hidden. He could count on one hand the number of times he'd spoken directly to 8, and he'd never been the one to initiate contact before, but this time he must. His loyalty had never allowed him to question, and if he survived this, there was certainly a backlog, but right now he had to focus like he'd never focused before. He tapped the screen and put the phone to his ear again. The line on the other end rang exactly 7 times before it was answered, the voice distorted by some app or other.
"Sorry?"
It said, and waited. "The first 6 are dead. The killer has 6 of the incorrect trail cues. They also have my children and their nanny, and I'm on my way to meet them. He says if I hand myself over, he will release them." "I know. I hope to kill him and whatever guard he has before they can kill me."
"Do you require assistance?"
"Probably, but I won't wait for it. And if I survive, we will have things to discuss."
"I understand. I'll send what I can, as fast as I can. If you survive, we will have a conversation. Face to face, I think."
Desmond paused. This was unheard of in his experience. But he set it aside for now. "Thank you, 8. I hope I get out of this. I'm sure your people prioritize my people over me, and I expect them to be taken good care of if I die."
"Of course."
"Goodbye, 8. Desmond ended the call, texted the location onto 8's number, and tucked it into a specially designed pocket in his field suit to keep it safe. He parked 2 blocks from the location and jogged the rest of the way, easily clocking the movement of the 2 snipers on the roof of the building and 3 thugs breaking off their charades to follow him into the building. It was a run-down old store, in a part of town that had fallen foul of a motorway extension some years prior. Losing that through traffic was enough to slowly lead most shop owners to depart, either for a better location or into debt. Somehow, a chicken fast food place still lived on one corner. Desmond presumed it survived on late-night takeaway orders, but it was closed now, too early for the drunken public to begin ordering. The sun faded behind Desmond as he walked further into the store, making speedy ambush and cover calculations from the counter and a few display cases left behind, covered in dust now. The whole place was dusty. It made it easy for Desmond to guess at how many people were further in. No more than 4, he thought, including whoever the kidnapper was. He hoped the dust wasn't getting to the twins. They'd both had to go on inhalers before, when colds had left their growing lungs struggling. He wondered how they'd all look at him after this. But no, he couldn't get emotional. Sensing the movement of the 3 thugs, he entered the stockroom and immediately slipped to the side, pressing his back against the wall. By the time they noticed something was off, all 3 of them were through the door. The 3rd thug had no chance to react, as a survival knife tore out his throat, spraying the other 2 as they began to turn. Dropping the dying thug to the ground, Desmond ducked and dashed forward, plunging the knife through the sternum and up into the heart of the 2nd thug. He felt a fist attempt to punch into his kidney, but the knife had met its mark, and the thug slumped over his shoulder. Letting go of the knife, Desmond carried his momentum, and the 2nd thug, forwards, slamming the back of the 2nd thug into the chest of the first, knocking him down. Desmond gripped the knife again, letting it slide out as he pushed the 2nd thug onto the sprawled one that remained, then knelt and quickly finished him off. With those 3 gone, his back was clear. He'd figure out the snipers later, and he could continue. At the back of this old stockroom was a manager's office, light coming from around the edges of the pulled-down blinds. This was where he would find the rest, the kidnapper with 3 others, plus the twins and Ryan. And unlike the other 3 thugs, these would be prepared. Desmond moved to one side of the door, crouched, and knocked. "I'm here." A shotgun crashed, peppering the door hard enough to break the top hinge in the lock, and it swung open slowly, leaning to the side. Desmond stayed put.
I know that didn't kill you. Wouldn't have fired it if it would have. Come on in, man."
Desmond stood, prepared himself to leap backwards, and stuck his head around the shattered door frame. The kidnapper held both hands up in the air. A shotgun sat on a scratched-up desk next to him. The 3 expected thugs were perched around the room, one on the desk, one on the window-sill, one propping up the back wall. All of them were shaved bald, with a day's worth of stubble, and they adopted the same pose, arms crossed, within easy reach of a shoulder holster. It was going to be much more difficult to take these 4 down. But first, his eyes landed on the far corner. Here was a large beanbag, on which Ryan sat, with the twin on each side. All 3 faces were puffy and tear-stained, and even from here Desmond could see bruises on them. The twins were mute with fright, but their faces had lit up with hope on seeing their daddy enter. It was tinged with uncertainty that tore at his heart. They had no idea what was going on, but he had to keep setting it aside. Getting them out safely was the only priority. Ryan nodded at him gently. Desmond wasn't certain, but he thought that nod said, "Do whatever you must. I have your girls." He nodded back. Ryan's priority matched his.
Ahem.
The kidnapper cleared his throat. Desmond turned dark eyes to him.
You don't recognize my voice? You don't recognize my face? Really, Desmond, I'm hurt. We were friends once. Only think back to the days before you began training for the hand. You went to public school, like the rest of us poor kids. You were poor yourself, remember?
Desmond said nothing. He was sure he did recognize this man now. Tony, from his old neighborhood growing up, but he had little to say to him.
We were a group of friends. At school and outside of it, we were all inseparable. Sleepovers, days roaming the woods,
playing games, imagining what we'd grow up to be. Do you remember your answer? Or mine? No firemen and famous singers for us. No.
Desmond nodded. You wanted to be powerful. And when any of us asked you how, you would shrug and say by any means possible.
And you wanted to be a good father, I recall. Nothing more.
Desmond shrugged again. So why are we here? Was finding me as part of the hand just a happy coincidence?
It was actually.
Tony laughed, his eyes crinkling closed for a moment. Fast as a streak of lightning, Desmond drew a knife and threw it, underarm across the room, finger pointing directly at its target, Tony's neck. The kidnapper burbled blood as he scrabbled at his throat, but Desmond was already moving on from him. With a sideways turn, he leapt atop the desk, kicking the shotgun away and reaching around the head of the thug there to grab his hand as it attempted to pull his gun. Desmond's other hand slid a stiletto into the back of his neck, severing his spine, and wrenched it sideways to slice the jugular. Grabbing the gun from the suddenly lifeless hands, Desmond slid backwards, behind the desk. This put him near his daughters and Ryan. He'd hear the girls crying, but he couldn't be distracted right now. As he was trying to calculate his next move, he heard the sharp crack of an assault rifle on single fire and the hollow boom of a large handgun. 2 thuds later, a voice called out, "Number 7, you alive?" Desmond quickly slid away the knife and gun and stood, hands in the air. "I am. That was great timing. Thank you." A man entered from the darkness of the stockroom, holstering the handgun Desmond had heard. They shook hands. "Good. We took care of the snipers outside, and my men are performing a sweep, but we don't expect to find anyone else. If you can hang here for half an hour, we'll be able to wrap up, get the cleaners in, and send you all home. You'll be under guard for a while, I'm afraid. Our superiors want to try and ensure this gentleman was working alone." Desmond nodded. "I understand. Please let me know when you're ready to get us home." The man nodded and went outside. 2 guards remained on the door, which was propped closed by part of a shelving unit for some privacy. Finally, Desmond felt he could drop the coldness. The killer faded, and the father returned. His girls stared up at him silently, and for a moment he stared back, unsure. They'd seen. What would it mean to them? "You saved us, Daddy?" came the softest of voices. Desmond nodded. The girls looked at each other, communication flashing between them, and at the same time they held out their arms for him. Ryan tried to extricate himself, but Desmond gently pushed him back down as he eased his way onto the now very full beanbag. "You looked after them. You get to stay." Ryan smiled, nodding, and the 4 of them hugged each other until they were told to move.
Thanks so much for listening. That was The Hand, read by Lexi Jones, written and edited by Lee Hulme. If you're LGBTQIA2S+, and you'd like to submit a story for us to use, we'd love to hear from you. Check the show notes for a link to do that. Also, in the show notes, see where else you can find us. We love visitors, so do come and say hi. Finally, info on the music and sound effects are also in the show notes. The show is produced by Tracy Clifton, Lexi Jones, and Lee Hulme. The intro and outro are read by me, America Young. Hi there. This has been a Team Cuddles production.